I'm Toni Radzihovksa. I'm the VP of Product for Ocado Technology. I'll be talking about online grocery to you today. And I joined Ocado 18 months ago. I was very excited. They had artificial intelligence. They had robots. They had 15% employee discount. But I actually started in a completely different place. So I started as a both industry and role. I started my career 22 years ago in private equity, and I was a marketing manager for a private equity fund. I then moved on to a telecommunications company where I built one of the largest brands in the Ukrainian market. And over the time that I was there, which was 6 years, it generated about, close to $500 million. And I thought, well, if I can build a business with this sort of revenue for somebody else, surely I can do it for myself. So I went and launched 2 startups. Now, a show of hands, any past or current entrepreneurs in the room? 1, 2, okay. Hardest job on earth. And I didn't earn anything close to $500 million. On that topic, any parents in the room? Okay, a little bit more. Another contender for hardest job on earth. I have to ask this, but I doubt that these people are here. Any parents who are also entrepreneurs? Oh my God, what are you doing here? You should be up on stage. This is way too complicated. So, startups was a great learning experience, but it was very hard. And I moved from Ukraine to UK at that point, and you can hear that I'm not British. And I worked here for Amazon, I worked here for Budweiser, now Ocado. I did short stints at Marks & Spencer and TransferWise, which is now called Wise. I keep saying the wrong name. But as a VP of product for Ocado, I product manage the delivery of supply chain software that is being used by retailers all over the world. Now, when I say Ocado, the majority of you are probably thinking, Ocado, isn't it a supermarket? And it is, but I'll talk to you. Actually, let's have another show of hands. How many of you actually ordered Ocado delivery through Ocado supermarket? Okay, Ocado people, I see you, please put it down. But some of you, so you know the experience as a customer, I will be talking to you about the experience, what happens behind the scenes, how all of this works to actually deliver food to you. And it's fitting that we're on the digital strategy stage because there's a lot of software, hardware, robotics that we as Ocado built. And of course, it's all been built by humans. The topic of this whole conference is digital by humans. So I encourage you to go and see the amazing humans at our stand 203 who actually delivered all of this. But let's take it back a little bit in time. Grocery was always considered a boring business. It was very predictable. You had a lot of repeat purchases, high loyalty, so kind of revenue streams generated, a few big players, established players. One of them is here, and some of them are here. But there was relatively little innovation or change there, but online changed everything. Now, if you think about an in-store model, a customer drives to a store, they go to, they get a trolley, they walk up and down the aisles, they put the food in their trolley, then they go to the checkout. Sometimes it's a self-checkout, doesn't have people there, and then they drive their food and themselves home. It's a so retailers can generate relatively low margins, but because it's a high volume business, it's a decent business to be in. But that changes with online because now customers don't have to go anywhere. All of the picking, packing, and delivery is now needs to be done by the retailer, which is costly. And it's very difficult, especially when you compare it to other e-commerce segments. In online grocery, you have fresh produce. Some of it needs to be refrigerated, cold chain, what we call it. Some of it needs to be frozen. Unlike, let's say, my previous employer, Amazon can buy staplers and they stay in the warehouse for years and years until somebody needs them. Here in the grocery business, it's also interesting because customers put up to 50 items into the basket. So it's a large basket size. And they will change their order quite frequently up until the time where it needs to get delivered to them. We also need to meet consumer expectations there. They expect freshness. They expect large choice, but they do want it to be easy to find the products that they like and they've bought recently. They also wanted the delivery to be on time to their home, but they don't want to spend the whole day waiting for the delivery. They also want it to be good value in terms of pricing, right? But you still get the fresh, high-quality produce. So that means you have to be extremely cost-effective on labor, on kind of your pricing strategy, on your delivery costs. So if you look at the orange line, that's the way you would traditionally deliver to a customer. So you would go from a supplier into a warehouse. The food would then be transferred to the store through a trailer, and then you can get it delivered to a customer in their homes. We took a radically different approach. We go straight from supplier into our warehouse, which we call Central Fulfillment Center, and then on to a customer. This allows us to do a few things, and we also have a lot of technology on all of this, kind of from supplier to customer, trying to make it more efficient. And that allows us to do a few things that a store delivery cannot do. One, freshness, because we cut a lot of the travel time. You usually get 1 to 2 days product or produce that is fresher versus if you would have gotten it from a store. We also have more choice because we have more storage. Again, compared to a store, a central fulfillment center has more storage, so you can both do standard products that everybody needs to buy anyway, and some unique or niche products. And as I said, we do a lot of automation on the way so that we know how to most efficiently pick and pack order and then get it delivered to a customer in the most efficient routing algorithm that we have. And we were so successful with that approach within our UK business, which is Ocado.com, which is the supermarket that you all know, that we decided, well, why not? We pivoted and decided, why not sell this technology to retailers elsewhere? And we now have 13 forward-thinking retailers all over the world using this technology to leapfrog their competition. What we sell them is the Ocado Smart Platform, which is a software and hardware and automation system, anything from web applications to routing algorithms with the warehouse as the core of the platform that they can use. It's all end-to-end. You can manage your supply chain, which is what I look after. You can manage your logistics. You can manage your web shops, e-commerce, and definitely you can manage your delivery. So how does this work? This is the largest fulfillment center we have in the UK. It's in southeast London. It's the size of 9 football pitches. And I'll be going through numbers and hopefully I will remember them all. There's over 3,000 bots running on top of this structure, which is containers built into stacks. We call this structure the hive or the grid. And these bots, they pick up 2 types of containers. They pick up containers with food and containers with customer bags, and they send them to pick stations where humans can put them into bags, food into bags. The bots run at 4 meters per second with only millimeters between them, you can see that. And there's an AI orchestration system that manages where the bot needs to be for the most efficient and quick pick. The bots can pick 50-item order in a few minutes, and they can do hundreds of them at the same time. And I'm sure I've forgotten some more data points, but I'll let it be. So this is all great, but you still have the problem of people having to pick at some point. And labor is expensive, especially in some of the markets where we operate or where the retailers that we partner with operate. So how do you solve for that problem? Before that, I'll tell you a few more interesting facts. See, I knew I had this slide there. So the bots that you've seen, there are over 10,000 of them, or there were in 2023, now there's more. There were over 10,000 bots running, and they made 24 billion moves. That's roughly 600 million games of chess. They also traveled 114 million kilometers. That's the distance between the Sun and Venus. We don't let bots go anywhere there, but still it's a lot of work for them. And they've lifted 83 million tons of produce. To give you an example, it's if we lifted all of the African elephant population on Earth, 400,000, 44 times. But as I said, we needed to be even more efficient, so we came up with this next innovation, a different type of robot, a robotic arm. Now, the warehouses that we have and our partners have sometimes have up to 50,000 items. So what is easy for a human, which is picking things and handling things, is very hard for robots, because you have items with different size, different weight, different shape, different deformability, not sure that's an English word, different, is it? Okay, fine. Fragility. And so if you can imagine kind of picking a box of eggs, which is very fragile, versus picking a bunch of bananas, which changes every time, right? Because it's a different shape of the bunch, or the different number of bananas in the bunch. So that was super hard for us to solve, both in hardware, which is this arm, and in software. So what we do now is all of these robotic arms, they have sensors and they have cameras on them. So they will actually see the product that they're about to pick, and based on that information, our orchestration system will give them the actual motor control instructions of how to pick it. These are now used in the UK and in Spain, and they're being rolled out globally. So you'll probably see more of them or learn more about them soon enough. But it's not all robots, because a lot of the software components are managed by AI, or kind of we implement AI into our software. For example, if you go onto a web shop, it's likely that your search recommendations are personalized for you. On Ocado.com, you would also see, for example, your basket will be pre-filled with what we know you buy usually, regularly. On the other hand, a lot of AI goes into our routing system, because it will need to calculate how to deliver an order in the most efficient way in terms of labor, the drivers, but also van cost and fuel cost. So it kind of underpins everything we do. I will talk a little bit about my area, which is supply chain technology, and the software that we produce there. It's not showing up. I'll have to talk you through it. But let's imagine Jane makes an order on Monday, and she wants an order to be delivered to her on Friday at 4 p.m. And Jane, let's say, wants steaks. At the moment where we are on Monday, there are no steaks in our warehouse. So what do we tell Jane? Do we tell her that it's out of stock? Do we try to get it in? Do we do something else? We don't even show her the steaks, so she doesn't have that thought in her mind. So this is where you need supply chain forecasting. And there are two types of forecasting. One is long-term, because you need it for long-term products, but also you need it to manage your supplier relationships, what comes when. Then you need the short-term forecast, because you need to make sure that labor in the warehouse is there to pick the order. So you need to work back from what Jane's time, which is 4 p.m., and say, okay, if she needs steaks at 4 p.m., that means they need to be packed in bags and in the van sometime before that, so the driver can drive it to her. That means it needs to be picked by people in the warehouse sometime before that. That means we must have received it from our suppliers before that. So knowing all of this information, you can then make a projection of, okay, will we be able to fulfill promise to Jane or not? What's more complicated, of course, that Jane then goes on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday and changes her order. She keeps changing her order, so you constantly have to recalculate, what do we have in stock? Will we be able to deliver it? The way we do it is very high precision, because we talk about customer experience, which is what's available for the customer. Will it be on time? Will it have substitutions? Preferably not. We would not like to substitute if we can. And of course, no missing items. But on the other side, you have retailer costs, because you also want to avoid waste, right? You don't want to order 10,000 carrots just in the hope that somebody's buying them, because you will throw them away at the end of the week. So that's my example from supply chain that I get very excited about, but maybe not everybody. And what I want to leave you with is the sort of the 5 learnings in my time at Ocado that I wanted to share with you. First one is start with the problem, not the technology. Yes, there's a lot of robots and fancy AI and robotic arms are all doing crazy stuff. But we at Ocado start with the problem and we try to understand, is there value in actually solving it? Because there will be always more problems than time on your hands and people who can solve them. Sometimes that problem can be addressed or can be solved through a technology. Oftentimes it's not. A lot of the times we just advise our partners to change their operational processes. You don't need AI, you don't need robots everywhere. If you want big changes though, and big results, you need to be brave. So my second learning is don't be afraid to disrupt. One of the learnings in Ocado was that the way warehouses traditionally work just wouldn't work in e-com space. I'll give you an example. Our first fulfillment center in Hatfield was opened in 2002. And it was very kind of more traditional warehouse. It had cranes and conveyor belts and things like this. The problem with conveyor belts as you scale the warehouses is that it becomes much slower to actually move the food along and move the bags along. And also, if something is wrong on the conveyor belt, you have to stop the whole thing, and that wreaks havoc for delivery time for customer. So we realized it's not going to work for us, so we literally turned it 90 degrees. We said, okay, instead of having conveyors go like this horizontally, now they're going to go vertical. And this is the bot and grid system that you see. This is the stacked containers and the bots running on top of it. Because that allowed us to scale and also partners all over the world to build larger warehouses where they needed them. But when you come up with this disruptive innovation, you also need to remember that it's good to de-risk that. And it's, you will have a lot of people asking you questions. So we did a lot of simulations when we decided to turn it on its side to see how this would really work. So things like A/B testing, pilots, simulations. If you have a radical idea and if you can prove that it might just work, then it will be easier for you to sell it to your stakeholders and your leaders, anybody you need to to get budget or approval from. Last but not least, well, not last, sorry, there's 5 of them, there's 4. Innovation happens in unexpected places. If you talk to anybody 20 years ago about grocery being this innovative space and being home to one of the most advanced robotics companies in the world, people wouldn't have believed it. So even if you're working in a relatively boring industry, a relatively boring company, have a think. If I was a startup in this space, if I didn't have all the legacy systems, all of the processes, would I have done this differently? There's always a way to look at it with fresh eyes and see whether you can improve something. The technology that worked for us before conveyors didn't work for us in the future, and doesn't work for us now, and maybe there's going to be another innovation after with this bot. We don't know. And last but not least, this is about people. This is about technologies being driven by humans, digital by human. It's not possible to do it just on technology alone. At Ocado, we have a no-blame culture, so people are allowed to experiment, learn, tell others about their mistakes or about their successes. We also have teams we have 7 development centers across the world. So that helps us as well to bring diverse perspectives. And we do try to have cross-functional teams solving a problem. Another example that I have, the bots that you've seen, they're made of metal. Unsurprisingly, that's very heavy. So and that creates a stress on the whole system, and that creates a stress on how quickly they can move. So we had a cross-functional team working across the globe to understand, well, what can we change? How can we make it lighter? What we actually realized is you can 3D print plastic parts for the bot. It doesn't need to be metal. Of course, it's very durable plastic, but still, it's a significant change. So the new generation of bots are all built in a slightly different way. They also look ugly, I have to say, because you get into this ergonomics of, and you decide, well, it doesn't need to be a plain sheet of something, metal. It could be smaller and therefore use less material and be even lighter. And that innovation was, again, an outcome of people rather than technology, but of course technology enabled it. So I'm hoping that you've taken some learnings about how Ocado operates. It's been lovely to have you here, and I'm happy to take questions.
Wow, Toni. Man, are we impressed? That was a great presentation.
Thank you. It wasn't only me doing all that, but yeah, I'll take it.
I think I loved the nuance that you brought out about consumer behavior, especially, when you spoke about the fact that, of course, you've got to think about traditional styles, which is price sensitivity, timely delivery,
Yeah.
but still also think about online consumer behavior. They tend to have large baskets. They tend to change their minds all the time. And then how do you drive those insights into actually building that whole custom experience that you spoke about? I think I absolutely loved it. That was one of my key
Thank you.
takeaways.
Thank you. I'll grab I need this, yeah? Because
Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I'm so sorry. I should have mentioned that before.
Now I can hear you.
Okay. And I think, you mentioned about the fact that all of us know Ocado is an online grocery store. What we didn't recognize, which we do now, is that it's also a exporter of technology. It's also actually a technology service provider because that's the monetizing the value proposition that actually Ocado has built. So that was something amazing to listen to.
And I dare say our technology business, I think, but we can look up in annual reports, is bigger than our retail business in terms of revenues, right? So it's a substantial part of the business.
Good to know that. All right, so we've got some questions here, Toni. And the first one is, what is the biggest challenge when managing such a large, complex product?
I think there's a few challenges. One is, how do you make sure that everything works together as expected? Because if you give this suite of tools, software and hardware solutions to a partner, how do they ensure that they leverage the most out of it, that they get the most out of it, that they know how to use the tools? So a lot of what we do is actually working hand in hand with other retailers that are using our technology and explaining to them how the platform should work in the best case scenario and how they can do it most efficiently. Then there's a problem that I talked about, which is you have so many problems to solve. How do you choose the right one? So having a robust prioritization process, in our case, it's based on value, but you could base it on something else. I don't know, relationship score with your customers or something else. Helps us narrow down, okay, this is what we're going to be working on. Yeah.
Okay, that's almost like, yeah, you're right. Prioritizing and choosing your battles, which battles to actually fight. That's really good. The next one that I have is, just give me a sec, yeah. How did you drive this strategic initiative? So, this whole initiative around bots and AI and robotics, and you mentioned that you first started in 2002, and then, of course, you guys, the whole technology platform was changed. My question is, how did you drive this initiative at a time when it was not industrialized? It was fairly new, and it was something that I'm sure would have invited criticism for using untried and untested technologies. So,
yeah, I think, well, the answer to that, you have to have believers in the company. Now, not everybody may necessarily be a believer, but if people do truly think that this is a technology that can change the way that people shop, and in our case, it was specifically some of the leaders who were with the business for a long time, but also, interestingly, shareholders who invested in the business because they thought it was a long-term play. They weren't looking for immediate outcomes, right? And finding the right shareholders and finding those believers and champions inside the company is very important. And we were unrecognized for this for a long time until 2020 when COVID hit. And everybody went online, and suddenly we said, okay, now everybody knows that we need this.
That's indeed a good point. Thank you for that, Toni. The next one says, how long does it take to innovate and roll out each new technology? For example, the robotics arms. And what would you describe it? Is it agile? Is it waterfall?
Yeah, we follow agile principles even within the hardware space with robots. Engineering follows the same kind of frameworks and principles, but it does take a lot of time because anything that's hardware, you actually need to procure this somewhere, the materials for it, even if you 3D print it yourself. So I'm guessing where we're talking about for hardware, 3 to 5 year cycle for innovation. For software, it could be quicker, less than a year, but it still does take time and belief to continue on the journey.
Thank you for that. There's clearly a lot of interest, so I do have some more questions.
Sure.
Yeah?
We still have 4 minutes.
Okay. Um, I saw this, so somebody's written, I saw this program the other day about Ocado and their bot warehouses. It was fascinating and I'd love to hear more about this. I believe whoever the person is, you have heard about
Hopefully you
it.
did. But if you want to ask more questions, as I said, I will be at our stand, which is stand 203, and I'm happy to take more questions for the next hour or so.
Perfect. Do you not worry about selling Ocado's smart platform to competitors?
Well, yes and no. There are kind of legal ways to do it, as in you don't sell to all of the competitors in the same market, for example, because then your exclusivity or kind of the value of it becomes less so because now everybody has it. But generally, we were always focused about changing the way people shop rather than worrying about competition, because everybody can have a brilliant idea, but it takes a lot of guts to actually go and execute on those.
Yeah, and that's something that's truly driving that disruption
Yeah.
in the e-commerce space. Your explanation of how Ocado use AI for short-term supply management was very interesting. Does this mean for every user that views your site, your software pre-calculates what's in stock theoretically if the user would want to order this product?
Yeah, there's well, we're constantly recalculating it. I think there's an insane amount, like 15,000 calculations per hour that are happening within the forecasting based on what was historic demand, what we think people will be buying in September, November, December.
Yeah.
But then there's also information about a particular basket. This person put these items, so he or she is likely to add also these items. Do we have them in stock? So there's, I believe it's like an 8-factor forecasting model. Yeah, that's based on neural networks, transformer models, all of the fancy words that we hear today.
Thank you, Toni. And I have two more. How do you improve grocery with less advanced technology? What is, in your opinion, the biggest wins and opportunity areas?
As we don't operate traditional grocery, because even our retail arm is pure play, it's harder for me to say what's going to happen in the stores or what should happen in stores. But I would always start with, what is the customer pain point that we're trying to solve? How are we solving it now? Is there a better way to do it? And hopefully a cheaper way to do it, but it doesn't always come that way.
I agree with you. Okay, this one's really interesting, and I would love your comment on this. You spoke about self-disrupting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you build a company mindset that challenges itself to drive self-disruption?
I knew this is going to come, and you're right, it's not easy. There are very few companies who can do it well, because it requires a few things. I mentioned before, kind of the leadership endorsement of this, and the culture around this. It's okay for us to make mistakes and learn from them and move on to something else, which is often very hard to do in large corporate settings, especially for companies who've been around 100 years. And I totally understand it, because you say, okay, I've been successful like this for 100 years. Why do I need to change now? It's much more risky for me. So perhaps I would say, and there are options that corporates leverage, like internal skunk works or startups, that can have a slightly different culture and can go and experiment, but in a sort of contained environment rather than disrupting the whole company straight out of the gates.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Toni. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.